Alive on the MOUNJARO, it's on the pen alive, with your host David Knapp.
Thank you, Clap Track, and happy Thursday night. I'm your host, Dave Knapp, ManOnMounjaro. That's why I'm here. You are on the pen. We go be sex scientific toes and trulicity Manjaros, that bound compound, that pen. That's what we talk about on this channel, and I'm so glad to be with you all tonight on a Thursday night with an exciting show for you tonight. We've got Dr. Matthew Weiner from Pound of Cure podcast, poundofcureweightloss.com. He is here to share a bit about bariatric surgery and GLP-1s and sort of that continuum. Super excited to talk to him. Thank you for bearing with me tonight as we came on a little bit later. Surgery waits for no one. And so we waited for Dr. Weiner to finish up his busy day to lend some time to the stream tonight. So please give Dr. Weiner some love in the chat. Excited to have him on tonight. Of course, I was on the Pound of Cure podcast. That episode dropped today, so make sure we will link it in the description of this video if you're watching this on demand. So you can go over to the Pound of Cure YouTube page and check out the episode that I did over there where I shared a little bit about my journey. And so make sure you check that out. But we've got a great show in store for you tonight. Thank you for hanging with us. So excited to be here. You know we've got a rhythm and a rhyme and a reason to this show, and so we're going to get right into some housekeeping.
Housekeeping.
You want mint for pillow? Hey, we got to give a shout out to Sue the Dude, to Deborah, to Turtle Fur, to Deb, to Sabrina. Welcome, Sabrina. To Natalie, to Brent Tuggle, who's, of course, one of the moderators at Zepbound for Weight Loss, our Facebook group, which is approaching 19,000 members. Yes, you heard that right. 19,000 members in a Facebook group. It's a big group. Michelle Hess is in the house. A long time. Michelle, fun fact, Michelle Hess has been a long time fan of Dr. Weiner's, part of his club, everything. She's all about him. She turned me on to him long ago, towards the beginning of even On the Pen. And so tons of good information. So it's fun. We're just like firing off some really great guests on the show. Mimi is in the house. Gina, J. May, Rudy, welcome. Thank you for hanging out. J. Neb, I see you too. Thank you all for being here. So let's talk about Karen. Hey, how are you? You're here. You're double dipping. Karen was on my TikTok live. We were talking about this. The housekeeping. So this is the most exciting thing. And I know that we shared this last week, but get used to it because we're probably going to be sharing a little bit about this every week on the pen, on the GLP-1 pen book. You see this? Yeah, this is coming soon to Amazon Kindle. You should be able to order a physical copy as well. I want to share a little bit about this book that will be coming out shortly. I've been working on this for some time, and I want to give you just sort of cast a vision for what this book is. This book is actually designed not necessarily for you in the community, although I think there are some great tidbits about the medications, about my own personal journey that are in there that you will enjoy reading it for yourself. But really what my heart is behind this book. I hear from so many people on a daily basis between the Facebook group, which I mentioned is approaching 20,000 people. We've got over 30,000 people on TikTok, over 10,000 over here on YouTube, and several thousand among the other social medias. I hear from a lot of people every day who are on this medication. And it's unique, right? Because even your PCP, your doctor, your telehealth company, they're not dealing with this many people who are on these medications every day. It's a really actually unique and sort of weird position to be in because you almost feel like you become a de facto spokesperson in a way, because the deal is this. I hear from so many people every day. Miss Tapman's in the house. Special shout out to Miss Tapman. Welcome, Miss T. It's always a pleasure to see you here. I hope you're doing well. Yeah, drop that book emoji in the chat. So one of the things that I hear most often is people are so afraid when they're on the pen to share with their loved ones that they're on the pen. And most of the time, what I find, friends, is that fear becomes out of really, some past, trauma with issues with their weight, struggles with their weight. but really because those around them really don't understand what these medications are. And immediately they'll go to the harsh stimulants that used to be prescribed for weight loss. They go immediately to some of the horror stories. And what they don't realize is that these medications are not a quick fix. They are a tool in the arsenal of someone who is simply trying to level the playing field metabolically, create an environment in their body that is more conducive to successfully putting their obesity or diabetes into remission. And so this book is designed for that person in your life who really does not understand these medications, but seeks to, wants to, or you want them to. And this book is written to them on your behalf, with my own personal journey woven into it, with a lot of facts that we share constantly on this channel, and hopefully we'll bring more people into it. And my heart for this book is that the people around you will understand these medications more. They'll understand the disease that you've been dealing with for so long more, that they'll understand you as a person more, and maybe even some people who are outside of this realm that could benefit from the use of these medications would be turned on by the fact that this book will dispel some of the myths and some of the falsehoods that go around about these medications. So that is the idea. Thank you, Deb, for the $4.99 super chat. Really super appreciate that. It's very kind and generous of you. That is the heart behind this book. So I wanted to just sort of give you that little update. I know that I told you last week that would be coming, but I wanted to mention it once more, and we'll probably continue to mention that as well. We're going to continue to roll on. Super excited to bring our guest in. So we're going to keep plowing through all of the things that we got to get to here. We're going to go right into what's fresh in the world of GLP-1s. One of the really fascinating things that we learned this week about Retatrutide, or if you've been following this channel for long enough, Retatrutide. So this is the triple G. They call it the triple G because all the receptors that it acts on start with a G, and there's three of them. There's GLP-1. That's what we kind of call all of these medications, even though it's not super accurate for the newer generation. We call these all GLP-1 medications. Incretin hormones. These are nutrient stimulated hormones that your body makes, right? And GLP-1 happens to be the most prominent or the most well-known incretin hormone, but GIP is the second one. Well, Retatrutide adds a third, which is glucagon. And I want to talk a little bit about what we learned from a study that was published this week. So when we talk about Ozempic or Wegovy, we're talking about semaglutide, or if you're a medical professional or somebody with a stick up your butt, semaglutide. So however you pronounce it, it's a GLP-1 analog, meaning that it just simply mimics that hormone that your body makes, GLP-1. The interesting thing with MOUNJARO and Zepbound, tirzepatide being the active ingredient, is that it's a GIP and GLP-1 dual agonist. It's acting on two of those incretin hormones. And the interesting thing is with tirzepatide is that it's actually, there's a ratio. It's actually very much not a GLP-1. In fact, it's a 5 times stronger GIP medicine, acting 5 times more on GIP receptors than GLP-1. So when we call MOUNJARO or Zepbound a GLP-1 medication, really what we should be calling it is a GIP medication, because it's very much weighted on the GIP side. Well, this is the fascinating thing that we learned about Retatrutide this week. Retatrutide tripled down on tirzepatide in that it is a 15-to-1 GIP to GLP-1 agonist. So it is 3 times stronger in its GIP activation than tirzepatide, with this glucagon kicker. And the interesting thing when we talk about nutrient stimulated hormones, right? So hormones that are released when we eat food, like incretin hormones, GLP-1, GIP, glucagon, not an incretin hormone, but a hormone that is stimulated by the nutrient intake. When we talk about these medications, the interesting thing is they're doing multiple things in our body, but all of the medications that are currently on the market act primarily centrally. Like primarily they're acting in your brain to reduce energy consumption, right? So you're eating less, you're bringing less energy into your body. Now, the amazing thing about Retatrutide, Retatrutide is that it's acting on glucagon also, and this glucagon component actually acts on your peripheral weight loss, meaning that it's stimulating your metabolic system to actually expel more energy. So you're sort of hitting the weight loss from both sides. You are reducing the energy intake and you're increasing the energy output. And that is really the magic of the next generation of weight loss, obesity management medications, is that it's acting sort of on two different pathways to stimulate weight loss. And so we learned this week that Retatrutide is a 15-to-1 GIP. And that is 3 times what tirzepatide is. So that was fascinating to me. I've always kind of hung on the glucagon part. Like, well, basically it's MOUNJARO plus glucagon. Well, actually not. It's a lot more GIP receptor activation than in tirzepatide. While I was on that rant, Linda Landers dropped a $9.99 super chat. Linda, thank you for being here, and thank you for the $9.99 super chat. Thank you all for being here tonight. Super, super excited to have you all here, and thanks for hanging out with me on a night where, you know, there's other people speaking publicly about more important topics than what I'm talking about here. But I appreciate you all hanging out with me here tonight, and Dr. Weiner, who will bring on, you know, the last little segment we like to get to before we bring our guests. We like to take out the trash on Thursday. We talk about the fake news that's going around in the world of GLP-1s, and this one's kind of fun. Let's take out the trash together, shall we? This is kind of a fun one, actually. Sue the Dude bailed me out on the fake news this week, so shout out Sue the Dude. This was a fascinating one. One of the things that we've talked about, one of the topics that I have really hung out on over the last year is the fake Ozempic. And we're not talking about simply like compounds or research grade chemicals. I'm talking about at the pharmacy level, pharmacies that have received in Ozempic looking pens and dispersed to patients who had prescriptions for brand name Ozempic, dispersing fake Ozempic, right? And what we learned is that many times it was insulin products that were inside these pens. Well, this one actually comes from the state of Iowa, which is where I hail from. There's actually a Michigan pharmacy company suing an Iowa business accused of selling it counterfeit medication. And basically what happened in this suit is you've got this Michigan company who paid an Iowa company to provide their pharmacy with brand name Ozempic. The Fed stepped in, they intercepted the package, presumably part of the story that we shared months and months ago about the insulin products that were rolling around. This really did not circulate widely in the mainstream media. As you can imagine, there's probably certain people who did not want that information getting out. But basically, our prescription drug supply was compromised in some way when it comes to semaglutide in the brand name of Ozempic. And what they basically did is the Fed stepped in. They seized all of those medications that the Iowa company was going to send to this Michigan company. The Iowa company, in turn, did not reimburse the hundreds of thousands of dollars on this purchase order in a timely manner. And so there's a huge lawsuit attached to it. The fake news this week is the fake Ozempic, right? And that is just sort of an interesting sort of side story on what you know that we covered on this. Now, one of the things that I want you to make sure that you do just is because some of you are probably hearing this story for the first time, like, what? There were pharmacies with fake Ozempic? Yes, there were. Very small amount. It happened much more overseas. There was a small story about a guy in Chicago who had a very serious health incident taking Ozempic, not realizing that it was fake and what was in it was insulin, and he was hospitalized, the whole deal. Fozempic. Yes, Darium. Nice. So yeah, the Fozempic story. For those of you who are concerned, you want to make sure that you have the brand name medication. To do so, there are some differences in the pen, what the pen looks like. There's actually an article that I did at OnThePen.com that shows you the difference between the pens. There are subtle differences. It definitely does look bootleg the more you look at it. The biggest difference is the tip of the pen. So these the pens that they were being distributed in look very similar to this, but they're actually Lantus pens. Sanofi, interestingly, a lot of the Ozempic pens are made in Germany. So are the Sanofi pens for insulin. They look very similar. And so the tip was purple on those, not this sort of gray color that you see on the Ozempic pen. Anyway, you can go to onthepen.com, get the full rundown on that. I think that they've got this under control by now, but just a fascinating story. And thanks to Sue the Dude for the fake news this week. Mimi in Australia with the $2.99 super sticker. Mimi, thank you. Mimi, of course, was on the pen, episode 61 of On the Pen. Tonight's episode is episode 73. I cannot believe that we've done 73 episodes of the show. It's amazing. And you all are amazing. This community is amazing. But Mimi is in the Retatrutide trial. Retatrutide trial. And her results are outstanding. I can't believe that it's already been like 12 weeks, 3 months since Mimi was on. We need to have her back on because her progress on Retatrutide in that trial is absolutely astounding. So we'll have to have you back on, Mimi. Mimi, of course, joining us. It's her lunch break over in Australia, so she joins us usually every week. So Mimi, thank you for being here. You are such a valued part of this community. We're going to continue on, though, here because we have a very busy man who had a very busy day who's giving some of his very busy schedule to this channel tonight. And so tonight we're excited to bring in Dr. Weiner, the proprietor of the Pound of Cure podcast and Pound of Cure Weight Loss in Tucson, Arizona, bariatric surgeon. Super excited to have him on the show tonight as tonight's hot channel. Let's welcome him in with our hot channel.
Hot channel.
Dr. Weiner, welcome.
All right, I can't hear anything.
You can't hear anything. Well,
my audio went out right at the last second.
That's how it works sometimes. So Dr. Weiner is here joining us tonight. He is a bariatric surgeon. Do you have me yet? You got some audio yet? A bariatric surgeon from Tucson, Arizona. Pound of Cure podcast. Drop Pound of Cure in the chat if you are familiar with the Pound of Cure podcast. It is an absolutely amazing podcast. Of course, Dr. Weiner was kind enough to invite me to come over and be on the Pound of Cure podcast, which happened this week. That dropped. And so you want to jump over. I'll make sure that I link it in the description of this video here. Lots of people dropping Pound of Cure in the chat. Thank you, Spoonie. Thank you for the $20 super chat. She can't wait for the book. So thank you very much for that. But Dr. Weiner and his Pound of Cure podcast, you good to go? So we're having some audio issues. All good. You just give me the thumbs up when you can. But Pound of Cure podcast is an absolutely awesome program. Michelle Hess, who is one of our moderators here and obviously a recurring guest, she's been here since the beginning of the show. She has been part of this Pound of Cure program for a long time. She has his books. She's all about, and she turned me on to him a long, long time ago. Of course, one of the things that we talk about here is how my bandwidth is usually pretty wrapped up, and have a hard time sometimes being able to connect with other content on here. But Pound of Cure is an amazing resource, and I had the chance to go on their podcast this past week. Thank you, Cloakster, for the $4.99 super sticker. Really, really appreciate you. Yes, Dr. Weiner, of course, has books. All of that can be found at his website. I'm going to scroll this across the bottom. His name is Dr. Matthew Weiner at poundofcureweightloss.com. So he has a practice. In fact, just tonight, the reason we came on a little bit later tonight was actually due to the fact that he was doing surgery. He was in surgery, and so we had to delay him coming on the show a little bit tonight just so he could finish that surgery. So thank you for hanging out with us tonight. But just really great information. And so he's going to come on because I was on his show earlier this week. He's here to share a little bit about his journey, not only with GLP-1s, right? But so many of you in the community here have benefited from some form of bariatric surgery. And that's presumably, Dr. Weiner, what you do all day, every day. So tell us a little bit, if you can hear us, about Pound of Cure Weight Loss and about your podcast.
Okay, absolutely. So first of all, thanks for having me. And I think if you guys enjoy listening to Dave, which obviously if you're here right now, you do, Please tune into our podcast. Dave was on, and the episode actually just dropped today, and we really had a fantastic conversation. So I'm a bariatric surgeon. I've been practicing for probably 15, 18 years now. 2004 is when I started. So 20 years. Oh, it's been, it goes by fast.
Quick.
Yeah, I know. So anyway, we kind of have these moments in our life where we hear this one talk or we kind of get this one piece of information. And very early in my career, this guy came up and he talked, his name was Lee Kaplan. And he basically said, everything we think about bariatric surgery is how it works is wrong. So that we all have been taught that gastric bypass works by causing malabsorption and restricting calorie intake. And he goes, that's actually not what's happening. He said, what's actually happening is by the way we rearrange the intestines, either by removing a portion of the stomach with a sleeve gastrectomy or by rerouting the intestines, that we change the GI hormones, the hormones that regulate your metabolic rate and that regulate your body weight and your fat storage. And he said, really what happens is just like everything else in your body, your fat distribution, the amount of fat you have is physiologically determined and regulated. And so that's why whenever we go on a diet, we restrict our calorie intake and we're eating very few calories, we lose a little bit of weight, but our body starts to fight back and it increases our hunger and it slows down our metabolism. And it's like our body doesn't want us to lose weight. And that same thing happens when you drop your blood pressure. Your heart rate speeds up and your heart starts to contract harder and it brings your blood pressure back up. We call that homeostasis, and body fat is a homeostatically controlled part of our body. And that makes sense because we're cavemen at heart. And if we're going to survive, we have to be able to weather a famine and get through food shortages. And, now there's no shortage for, 99.9% of us. And so we have the opposite problem, which is obesity. And so it's the hormonal regulation that really drives weight loss. And he talked about a bunch of hormones. GLP-1 was one of them. And so when I saw GLP-1 starting to come out with Saxenda, I kind of said, hey, this is really an extension of bariatric surgery, not a replacement of it. And I've been very quick to implement them in our practice. And we kind of have an army of nurse practitioners who work with patients and will help them adjust the medications. And we do it pre-op, post-op. It all kind of flows together back and forth with our surgical patients.
Yeah, that's very well said. And I think, as I was kind of mentioning earlier in the show, I have a really unique position. And of course you have even more so unique because you do have patients. You are a medical doctor, you're a surgeon. I am just a guy on YouTube, but we both interact with thousands of people who are on these medications, right? And it's a really weird for a guy who's no medical background at all. It's a weird position to be in. The interesting thing is that there is a continuum of bariatric surgery and these medications, and it's actually how it's sort of framed to me by my doctor, who is my PCP is actually an obesity specialist as well. And I realize sometimes that's not saying a whole lot based upon my interaction with some people, but he really framed it that way. He said, like, listen, these medications are actually accomplishing what bariatric surgery does. People think bariatric surgery just you're taking out, and just like you said, you laid it out virtually the same way that he did. He said these are restoring sort of a balance to these gut hormones that people otherwise would need surgery to do. So that said, can you kind of tell me in your opinion, because one of the big things that I hear just in random comments here and there is like, these are going to eliminate the need for bariatric surgery. Speak to that a little bit, what your position is or what you thought.
Yeah, I mean, when they first came out, that was certainly my fear. I mean, you can imagine you train for over a decade to learn to do something. It takes you 3, 4, 5 years of practice to be any good at it. You finally get good at this thing, and then all of a sudden it's obsolete and not useful. So the meds kind of terrified me a little bit when they first came out, and I kind of embraced. I said, well, if you can't beat them, join them. And so I figure, well, I'm an obesity doctor first and a surgeon second. So I'm going to embrace these medications. I think it'll be interesting. The first question is, how much weight loss are we going to see from this next generation of meds?
Yeah.
Is it going to take the 400-pound person and bring them down to a weight of 200? And my suspicion is they're probably not going to be that good. The other thing I think that we're going to see is that there's just so much variability with the response to these medications. Some people, and we don't know why, that's something we need to figure out. The pharmacogenetics of this medication is not well understood, but we know they play a huge role in people in these variable responses. Some people we put them on 5 milligrams of Zepbound and they lose 100 pounds. Other people, they ramp up to 15 milligrams and they've lost 12. And so, we look at our practice, first of all, bariatric surgery is for those people who don't respond to medications. And more commonly, those patients who can't get them. That's really what we see. It's just prohibitively cost prohibitive. And so they look at bariatric surgery as less expensive. And I think that's going to be a huge component too, is it's really going to come down to cost, a one-time surgical intervention versus long-term use of the meds. And we know that right now the meds are more expensive, but hopefully someday that won't be true. Hopefully someday the meds will be really, really inexpensive. So I think it's going to be a slow roll out for bariatric surgery. Hopefully, another 15 years to end my career.
I personally, based upon my, anecdotal experience with hearing from people is that for the near term, the next 10 years, there's going to be a need. There's going to continue to be a need for it because of the accessibilities. And I love, and I'm sure you get all sorts of feelings about this, but I love the warming of insurance companies to bariatric surgery over the last year and a half. All of a sudden it's like, hey, you know what? Do you ever consider surgery? Something that, was a huge barrier for bariatric patients looking for surgery over the last probably 20 years. Now insurance companies sort of glomming on to the idea.
I'll tell you something I think, and I agree. I think the truth is bariatric surgery has been pretty well covered for a long time now. I think that what we're seeing is that the insurance companies are realizing, like you said, that surgery is cheaper than meds.
Yeah.
But what I've really appreciated is the meds have kind of opened up this conversation about obesity as a metabolic disease. And there's, as we've kind of embraced these meds and everybody's on them and all the Hollywood insiders are taking them and, people are so crazy about these meds. We're all starting to recognize, hey, actually weight loss, obesity, it's complicated. And so I'm seeing a little bit of that bias come out of bariatric surgery. Where people are like, oh, it's just it's like having a surgery that makes you have Ozempic all the time. That's kind of, people are starting to look at it that way, and it's starting to become a little bit more reasonable. And so that's what I've really seen is more socially that there's been a warming towards surgery as a result of these medications.
Yeah. And I think that is a huge part of the conversation that takes place within the GLP-1 community, is just that educational piece about how do we advocate for just education among the masses, right? What can we be doing as content creators? These are the kind of conversations that we have to help get out of our bubble. Like if we are inside the bubble of obesity medicine, of bariatric surgery, you get it, you understand it. But I feel like one of my passions and sort of convictions that has started to develop over the last, let's say, 6 months into content creation, since all of a sudden I have a voice that matters within a community of people that I never was looking for. It just sort of happened, is that I really want to help people have the tools to educate the people within their circles. Like I want you to be able to sit at your Thanksgiving table and not feel weird when your family says, so what are you doing? You look great. You look, and all these things that are like, if you have dealt with the disease of obesity, are like super loaded with all sorts of emotions. Like even to hear like, you look great, then you're like, oh, so I've just looked terrible for the last hour, but like I want people to not feel that way. And so that's why I don't know if you had heard it at the beginning, but I've written a book, and it'll be releasing in the next couple of weeks just on that very topic. Like, it's written to that person, right?
Oh, wow.
Like it's written to the people around your Thanksgiving table that you can just go here, you know, like, and it's just like, here's the medicine. Here's the history of it. Here's why it's not what you think it is. Here's why it's not what you've heard that it is. And here's what it's doing for this person. And the thing that I always say that they do is they sort of, for many people, they level the playing field.
Right.
They give people a fighting chance at metabolic health, at a healthy weight, at a healthy lifestyle that otherwise absent. And surgery is certainly under this umbrella. So yeah, in a huge sense, the bariatric community paved the way for the things that we're talking about in the sort of incretin mimetic community. And they are sort of intertwined with each other. And I'm unique to that because, as you know, as we shared about on your podcast, like, I'm the kind of guy who's sitting here like, probably will have bariatric surgery at some point. One of the things that you and I were talking about before, kind of after our podcast the other day and a little bit before this one, was the response to these medications and how, you know, you talk a lot about how these work synergistically with bariatric surgery. Of course, Dr. Daniel Rosen has been on talking about very similar things that he's seen in his practice. Can you just kind of fly over some of the interesting things that you saw in the SURMOUNT trial when it comes to how people respond to these medications? You mentioned a couple statistics that I hadn't heard before that I thought were really fascinating.
Yeah, I could probably bring up the graphic really quickly am I allowed to share my screen?
I'm not sure what shows up on your screen or not, but
okay. All right.
If you are,
so this
or text me the link and I can throw it up.
Yeah, if you can pull up the SURMOUNT trial, I'll do a Google. Sorry, I don't want to take everybody's time. But the SURMOUNT trial has a great paper, a great graph, and let's see. The graph it's actually right on the if you download the PDF, I think it's it's the second graph. I'm looking at it now. I don't know if I can share my screen. Let me see. I'll drop it in the chat here. But essentially what it says is that if you look at to me, that one graph kind of tells you everything you need to know about this whole trial. The first thing is that they looked at the percentage of people who lost more than 5% of their body weight. And they looked at placebo, people who got 5 milligrams, 10 milligrams, and 15 milligrams of tirzepatide. And there was in the 15 milligram group, so the high dose, there was about 10% of people who did not lose more than 5% of their body weight. So they essentially lost, a few pounds, and that was it. They were non-responders. And so, and the Ozempic trial, or the Wegovy trial, shows an even greater percentage. I don't have the number off the top of my head, but there was a higher percentage of non-responders to semaglutide than there were to tirzepatide.
Wow.
And I think one of the interesting things that we're going to see about these third generation meds is what's the non-responder rate going to be? Is it going to be still 10%? Is it going to be 5%? Is it going to be 2%? And so I think that's going to be an interesting thing. The other thing we saw is that there was a decent percentage of people, maybe 15 or 20%, who at the 5 milligram dose of tirzepatide lost more than 25% of their body weight. And we saw that we see that in the surgery community. We see kind of poor responders and we see super responders. There's just a huge variability. What I talk to patients about is, 10 to 15% of people don't respond to these meds. 15% or so are super responders, lose crazy weight. And then everybody else is somewhere in the middle. And that's you'll be in the middle.
Does that, so that kind of dovetails on Jen's question, who said, I'd love if you could speak to patients whose surgery didn't work, but then the meds worked like a charm. My initial response to what you just said was, well, is it the people who don't respond to surgery are then predispositioned to not respond to the medications also, or is there correlation, or what do you see?
First of all, it's complicated. I don't know if Jen feels comfortable, but she can drop some more info, like what surgery did she have, what she have a sleeve, she have a gastric bypass, how much weight did she lose, she a diabetic, just some other basic factors, because there's a lot of nuance to answering that question. So I'll just kind of speak generally. The first thing is diabetics generally lose less weight, whether it's from surgery or from the meds, and we see that for sure with tirzepatide and with semaglutide. And so I think, we don't see a ton of complete non-responders to gastric bypass. So my suspicion is that Jen is a sleeve patient. My sense is that what Jen is experiencing is the value of combination therapy. And when I talk to my sleeve patients, because I think we all have to acknowledge that a gastric sleeve has an exceptionally high rate of either weight regain or poor weight loss. Just like
why is that?
It's just a less powerful surgery. We're only removing the fundus of the stomach, so we're really only affecting the hormones of the stomach. Where with gastric bypass or SATI procedure, duodenal switch, we're involving the intestines, and we're kind of changing the way the food flows through the intestines, and so we get a lot more of a hormonal response. And they've shown that over and over again, that just there's a more powerful hormonal response. So sleeve non-diabetic in mid-40s, lost 40 before it came back on. So that to me would be a relatively poor responder. And when I talk to my sleeve patients, and again, I don't know what your starting weight is, but my hunch is that was less weight than average and then weight regain. And so there's a lot to unpack. This is a great question from Jen. So the first thing is that combination therapy, a sleeve plus meds, is an amazing weight loss treatment. And so if Jen looks at this and says, well, I had a sleeve and I lost my weight and I gained it all back, and so the sleeve was worthless and the GLP-1 meds were what really did the trick, I'm not quite certain that that's 100% accurate statement. I think the sleeve kind of primed the pump. It's this set lowering, getting back to what I talked about with the set point. What Jen experienced was she lowered her set point by 40 pounds with the sleeve. Because the effects are relatively weak with a sleeve, the set point started to creep back up. And when she started the meds, there was this memory of that lowered set from the sleeve. And it kind of triggered some of these old pathways.
So she was sort of starting from a lower set point, which is why the meds helped her to respond.
Or a more flexible set point, I think, because she probably gained all the weight, but it just had that much more ability to move and to slide down. And I love a sleeve plus GLP-1s. I think it's an amazing combo. It's the most expensive option of all. So 241, she lost 40 pounds, and now she's 135. I've seen that a number of times. And
she's responded remarkably to tirzepatide.
Yeah. And so I think that some of that 135 pounds is from the sleeve. My suspicion is, and we have kind of a non-surgical arm, but we treat tons of patients with weight regain. I see a lot of patients, and we talked from the start. Our plan is sleeve plus meds long term, and they like the sleeve because it's a less invasive surgery. There's kind of less moving parts, but then the meds kind of give it that effectiveness that we get from a gastric bypass.
Yeah. So excellent question from Jen tonight. Good to have you here again, Jen. It's funny because, on this journey of creating content in GLP-1 space, it's like a lot of people start with you and then they lose the weight. There's not as much interest in learning about all this stuff when you've accomplished what you set out to accomplish. And we don't do a whole lot on maintenance here. So because I'm not there. Probably. But Jen is one of those people who she responded so well to GLP-1s. Of course, Michelle, who's in here, is a bariatric surgery patient who responded amazingly well to tirzepatide as well. One of the guests that I would really recommend you look at having on Pound of Cure is Jamie, Triplet Dad of TikTok. I don't know what the heck he's calling himself on TikTok anymore, but he has gone from over 700 pounds to now he's down to 300 and around 350. And that was he started. He's on a ketogenic diet, but he started with that and then added GLP-1 and then sort of was like, I got to have the surgery to get to where I want to be. And then at the end of last year, and he's got 2 or 3 episodes of this show that we did with him. He ended up having gastric bypass at the end of last year. And just, I mean, that just supercharged his weight loss. And he has done so great. And so if you're looking for somebody with a dramatic story, that is a dramatic story.
Yeah, we'll for sure reach out to him.
And he's a great interview. Yeah, you should check out those episodes of OnThePen with Triplet Dad on it. But yeah, there's just so many people. I would say a good, I don't know about a majority, but I would say at least 30 to 40% of the followers here on YouTube are former bariatric surgery patients.
And we've really seen, I think, a lot of, initially there was actually in the bariatric surgery community, there's some people saying like, I would never take meds. And we were like, listen, we complained about people saying I would never have surgery. We have to be open to everybody, So I think that was, Jamie had a duodenal switch, which is, that's the big kahuna of bariatric surgery. But anyway, so there's now been a lot of adoption and embracement of the GLP-1s in the bariatric surgery community. And I think it's because these people understand that obesity is a metabolic disease and that medical treatments are the most effective way to treat obesity. And that's slowly starting to get into the zeitgeist, but it's bariatric surgery patients. They've learned that a long time ago with their surgery.
So one other question, and I know you've had an extremely busy day, so thanks again for lending some time to the show tonight. I have one more question. Unless somebody else has a question, you can drop it in the chat right now. But I'm curious to hear. So when you think back, I think you said that you've been doing this for around 20 years, since 2004. So when you think back to 2004, I realize you're jogging the memory. I don't know that I can think back that far, but you think back to 2004 and you think about just sort of the landscape of obesity medicine and what the challenges were that you faced then. How do the challenges that you faced in 2004 as it relates to helping people achieve success, how do the challenges from 2004 compare to the challenges in 2024? Can you sort of contrast those a little bit, like what it was like then to what your concerns are now, or maybe you don't have as many concerns now and you just see a brighter future?
I mean, to some degree, looking back 20 years, that's a really difficult question to answer, because in 2004, our healthcare system worked for the majority of people. And in 2024, it doesn't work for the majority of people. And so this, do you
just out of curiosity, do you attribute that to the ACA? Was that the inflection point, or was it just a natural evolution of?
I think the ACA had a little bit to do with it. I think it's the mergers and acquisitions of the insurance companies. The insurance companies looked at this and said, hey, this is 15% of our GDP. There's a huge money grab. And they just jumped into the system, took control of it, and have managed to extract the maximum amount and just been forced to, over 20 years, grow on a quarterly basis so that the CEOs can keep their jobs. And they've just gotten better and better at charging fees and creating PBMs, and CVS buying Aetna buying CVS, and Caremark, and coming together as this entity that is just an impossible beast to take on, and kind of taking all the caregivers, and they're like, we control the money and we're not giving it to anybody. We're keeping it for ourselves. And so the patients are going to have to fight for care. That's essentially what it would be great to look at policy, but honestly, I think policy is the only thing that's going to save us at this point. So, and the ACA was flawed. More recently, the No Surprises Act, that gave insurance companies the final little, now I got you and you can't do anything. There's no recourse against insurance companies as a result of that act, which was put in place for good reason, because doctors were doing some shady things and charging patients $14,000 for 45 minutes of anesthesia and coming after them, financially. So it was a good act from that perspective, but the unintended consequences of it. I think if I could take 5 minutes though, just to talk about nutrition, I think that I would love to really discuss that, because
let's do it.
I think that's the most common mistake I see is people look at these meds and say, hey, I just take the meds, eat a little bit less, and they're going to work like a charm. And also looking at the ketogenic diet as kind of the diet, the way of weight loss. We don't promote the ketogenic diet. We have a podcast episode 2 episodes ago called Why We Hate Keto. We embrace a very nutrient dense diet. So diets can really, in essence, be broken down into calorie restriction, low fat, low carb, or nutrient dense. You name a diet, I'll explain it in one of those terms. One way or the other. Of course, there's nuances and differences, but that's the types of diets that will cause some form of weight loss. So we embrace a nutrient dense diet. I've talked a lot for many years about something I call your calorie ratio. I once had an app and it kind of got away from me and it's not available anymore. I'd love to get it up and running, but it's the idea of the ratio of the calories that you consume, the good calories you consume to the bad calories you consume. And it's actually that ratio that matters. And so the goal is to eat as many fruits, vegetables, nuts, seeds, beans, a little bit of lean animal protein, and eliminate the processed food, even the calorie-free processed food. And so we really push and promote eating tons and tons of fruits and vegetables. The Pound a Cure comes from a pound of vegetables every day. That's where we start from with patients.
Interesting. I just want to sort of dovetail on what you're saying there. One of the things that, because my brain has been hardwired for keto for 20 years, and that's a tangled mess to unweave. And one of the interesting things, I had a cardiologist on back in February, and he was a hoot. He just says what is on his brain, and we got into my own sort of journey. And one of the things that he said that stuck out to me was like, you just got to figure out a way to eat the amount of food you want to eat that just has lower calories and more nutrient dense food that takes up the same amount of space in your stomach, basically. And that really stuck with me. And that's one of the things that I've slowly been trying to implement is like, okay, if I'm still hungry, like what the heck can I eat? But when you're diabetic and you have keto hard programmed into your brain, that's a tough nut to crack, because it's like, if let's say I have a bowl of watermelon to my left and a ribeye steak to my right, I'm more inclined to eat the ribeye steak because it seems like the healthier option, but it's
not.
No, especially for somebody who's predisposed to heart disease. I have a CAC score of 19. There's so many more, medical things to consider outside of just your blood sugar.
I want to talk a little bit about animal fat, because I think that's the big issue with keto diet, is that it looks at animal fat as a totally acceptable thing to eat in an unlimited fashion. And animal fat has been associated with heart disease and cancer, like probably 30 to 40 different types of cancers, but also, most importantly, diabetes. And that's the big problem with the keto diet, is it keeps you diabetic because you can control your sugars, but you're still diabetic. your body does not respond appropriately to carbohydrates when you eat them. And so you're treating that by just being like, well, I'm a diabetic, going to be a diabetic for the rest of my life. Sucks for me. I'm just going to eat less carbohydrate. And that's the idea behind a ketogenic diet. But if you eat less of one thing, you're going to eat more of the other. And that's why a ketogenic diet has lots of animal fat. And the animal fat causes worsening insulin resistance. And that insulin resistance makes your diabetes worse. So when you're on a keto diet, your A1C staying the same, your sugars aren't going crazy, but actually your diabetes is getting worse and you're kind of feeding the disease and it's progressing and getting harder and harder to treat. If you put someone on, and on my website, which you kindly got kind of sliding below, we have something called the Metabolic Reset Diet. I like to think of it like a vegan diet without having to be a vegan. You still get to eat a little bit of meat, but that big ribeye is not on the Metabolic Reset Diet. A few pieces of a grass-fed ribeye would work on that, but and if you really think about it, when you eat steak, it's those first 3 or 4 bites that's like amazing. And I love steak, don't get me wrong, and I'll cook a mean one up. But do you need to eat a giant ribeye? And I think what you find is that if you put a lot of vegetables on your plate, maybe some beans, then you just have a few pieces of that ribeye, and it's still a delicious, satisfying meal, and you don't feel like crap. And it actually works to heal your diabetes, so that your insulin, your body to respond appropriately to insulin.
So
how? So that's not entirely clear, but the belief is that fruits and vegetables contain hundreds, thousands of different compounds called phytonutrients. And we hear about these, and people every now and then they pop up and they're like, oh, resveratrol, take a resveratrol supplement. Resveratrol is a phytonutrient found in grapes and beets and I think red wine and a couple of other places. And so there's all of these different compounds, and these compounds are vital for our metabolism to function appropriately, for our body to be able to respond to carbohydrate in a reasonable manner without letting our sugar go through the roof. And so when we eat largely processed food and don't eat many of these phytonutrients, our metabolism starts to break down, and it's essentially a vitamin deficiency. It's a nutritional deficiency. That's what we're seeing with diabetes, is because we're not getting these valuable phytonutrients in.
Very fascinating. I'm very good. I realized we talked about before we jumped on that this was the main kind of meat of what we're going to talk about. It took
I'll come on again. We'll talk more about it.
30 minutes together. Yeah, I would love for you to come on again and continue this conversation. It is the whole concept. It's sort of funny because you said this on the podcast that I did with you over at Pound of Cure. Make sure you check that out, folks. If you are just joining us, poundofcureweightloss.com is Dr. Weiner's website. He is a bariatric surgeon, runs a practice down in Tucson, Arizona called Pound of Cure Weight Loss. But they got a podcast. He's been creating content, I think he said for like 10 years, maybe. So lots of great content from Dr. Weiner, if you like what you're hearing tonight. But you had mentioned on that podcast, you can reverse your diabetes without keto. And even a year and a half into trying to untangle my brain from that thinking, because it really is a tangled mess I saw great success at weight loss early on when I was about 18 years old. And I spent the next 20 years of my life chasing that every year, down 35, down 25, up 35, down 25, up 35, all the way to diabetes and severe obesity.
I used to be able to run a mile in 5.5 minutes when I was 18. Now running a mile sounds like torture to me, you know? Our body ages and it doesn't respond the same way. And so if you continue to kind of look at your metabolic life like you're 18 years old, you're going to be chasing something that you're never going to find again.
Yeah. And I definitely chased it for the last 20 years. And you know, it was funny because when it stopped working to lose any weight at all, that was sort of one of the points where I was like, something's not right. And I went in and I was diabetic. I mean, there were other contributing factors, but it was just interesting. So yeah, I am super intrigued to hear more about Pound of Cure, your approach to nutrition. I know you had mentioned on your podcast that you guys were going to send some books, so I'll be eager to kind of tear into those. Some of the people that I've respected the most along my journey here, creating content about obesity and obesity drugs, is and she's in the chat tonight, Michelle. She's achieved amazing results with a combination of bariatric surgery and GLP-1s, but she's become a great friend to the channel and to myself as well. And she's in maintenance now. So if you get anything about maintenance from OnThePen, it's usually because she's coming on and sharing something. But yeah, she's talked about how she's benefited from your content quite a bit, having some sort of membership to it that you offer. So definitely jump over, check out poundofcureweightloss.com. Check out Pound of Cure podcast. And the episode that they had me on was dropped today, you said?
Yep, dropped today.
Yep. So I think I got a link up to that somewhere, but we'll make sure we drop it up in the show notes too. Anything else that you wanted to touch on before we cut you loose tonight?
No, I mean, I think just the last thing I'd probably add is kind of putting the whole thing together, kind of where we started talking about set point. We look at these, there's 4 ways you can lower your set point. And I think anybody who's trying to lose weight should kind of consider to try to use as many of those as they possibly can. And so there's bariatric surgery, we talked about it. There's GLP-1 medications. There's what I refer to as nutritional change, which is changing the type of food that you eat and maintaining that change. And whether, again, ketogenic diet, which does work for some people, but certainly not for others, our nutrient-dense diet, which is what we push. These are all kind of things on this continuum. They all work together to lower that set point. And so to use one without using the other. The fourth, incidentally, is building muscle and using it vigorously. And so, everybody who's trying to lose weight should kind of look and be like, how can I get the most out of building muscle? How can I get the most out of nutrition? How can I get the most out of meds? And I think the goal should always be to use as much of the nutrition and the exercise as you can, especially as you transition into maintenance mode, so that maybe you can use a little less medication, so that if you do experience a life event that causes weight gain, and we all look back, we can all find events in our life that led to weight gain, that, hey, then I'm going to push back up on the med. I'm going to use it at that point. And I think we've looked at maintenance as same med, same dose, rest of your life. Mm-hmm. I don't know if that's what it's going to be for a lot of people. I think there's going to be some flexibility in there, particularly if you're maximizing the nutrition and the exercise.
Yeah. So just like weight loss in general, we sort of tend to want to look at it linear, like it's just going to go straight down. In reality, it's messed up. And so maybe it's kind of the same way, like you expect to be here. But yeah, that's great. That's the first time I've heard that. And I think that makes a ton of sense. Just to kind of dovetail on one thing before I cut you loose, you had mentioned about the medications and the different dosing for maintenance, but also to achieve weight loss. Are you someone who tends to advocate for staying on as low a dose as possible or following the manufacturer titration schedule for weight loss?
Yeah. So this is something that frustrates me. We're a real low and slow kind of place. If someone's losing weight, again, because when are you stopping this thing? So when you're ramping up the dose, you might be accelerating the amount of weight you're losing, but you're probably not changing the total amount of weight you're going to lose. But you're dramatically increasing the side effects, the risk you're going to be hospitalized with pancreatitis. And really the key is to get you on this med and to keep you comfortable and safe on it because you have to be on it for a long period of time. And so when we ramp the dose up, boom, 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 that's when we run into trouble. So people are already struggling on 2.5. They're having nausea. They're having side effects. And then they're at 5 and they're miserable. Yeah. They're next thing you know, they're in the ER dehydrated getting an IV. And that's just not, to me, that's stupid. That doesn't make any sense. What pisses me off too is the insurance companies sometimes are like, oh, we won't approve 2.5, but we will approve 5 because they've been on it for a month. So you have to go up on the dose, just like the manufacturer says. That's
Right.
nonsense.
Yeah. Well, it's more practicing medicine from the PBMs. And so it shouldn't surprise us, but I am encouraged on the PBM side. I made a video on this earlier this week. I think I can never keep track of where I post it, but Illinois passed some really what I felt was meaningful PBM reform.
Oh, fantastic.
And essentially what they did was they eliminated step therapy in this bill, which I thought was a really meaningful.
That's fantastic.
Because step therapy, I mean, that kind of gets to the heart of it. Like the second you started allowing insurance companies to require step therapy, they're practicing medicine. The other thing that they did is they started to sort of pull the thread of prior authorizations too, saying that when it comes to psychiatric care, especially emergency psychiatric care, there's no prior authorization process at all. And then you have to spell out what you're doing for the rest of the medications that somebody's going to be on, or treatments or surgeries or whatever it may be. You have to spell out what your PA process is, because the amount of shenanigans that have been pulled, I mean, it rises even above practicing medicine. It's like anti-medicine. And
you're exactly right on that, Dave.
I think, and I would love to have more of these conversations with you on this stuff, because I think that was where some of our most interesting conversation took place, sort of like off camera when we were talking the other day. But we'll do it again. I want to cut you loose because I know you've had an extremely long day, and I really appreciate you coming on, Dr. Weiner. PoundOfCureWeightLoss.com is obviously where people can find you. Do you have a lot of patients that traverse from other states, or are you primarily dealing with people in the southern Arizona?
We do have kind of a concierge type program if someone needs prescriptions. Something that we do work with is that we come up with, we call them creative dosing strategies. I won't go into those in too much detail, but they allow us to use the real meds at compounding prices for a lot of patients. And so we do offer that. And so if you're interested, you can reach out to us through the website.
Great.
And we work with you. And then also come up with maintenance strategies and all the stuff that's, because the truth is, if you're not working with patients on their budget and the cost of this, you're not going to get anywhere.
Yeah.
The first thing I talk to people about is how much money you have. Is this something, can you just spend a lot of $550 a month, or is this something we have to work to figure out a way to get this cheaper? And so anyway, yeah, so we do see patients from across the country just for that program.
Great.
So yeah,
Great.
Thanks for having me on, Dave. Really appreciate it. Yeah. Really a huge fan of all that you do. I've watched so many of your content, and to me, you're way ahead of everybody on thinking about this. And I really give you a lot of credit for the time and energy you put into this. You're really adding a lot to the community. So thanks for doing that.
I appreciate that very much. Those are high compliments coming from somebody like you. So I appreciate that, Dr. Weiner. PoundOfCureWeightLoss.com, Pound of Cure podcast. Make sure you check it out. Make sure you go over and give them a follow on YouTube. They've got a great YouTube channel here, tons of resources. I know so many of you are in the bariatric community. I think you all would benefit greatly from his content. So thank you for being here tonight. Enjoy the rest of your evening. Hopefully you can relax a little bit after your long day. And thanks again for lending some of it. We'll hopefully do this again sometime soon.
Absolutely. Take care.
Have a good night. Dr. Matthew Weiner, MD, bariatric surgeon, Tucson, Arizona, PoundOfCureWeightLoss.com. I hope that you enjoyed this conversation tonight. I really feel like this was a needed conversation, not only for the community, but I love interviews like this that are so helpful to me. And when I had the wonderful opportunity to go on the Pound of Cure podcast, there's a lot of the off the camera stuff that we were just conversing about that I just was like, man, you said this, and I was like, you got to be kidding me. And just I learned so much even in that brief interaction. I know that you all will learn more from his content if you dive into it a little bit deeper too. So PoundOfCureWeightLoss.com, Pound of Cure podcast. Check it out. Hope you enjoy it. Make sure that you drop a comment when you watch that podcast. Make sure you drop a comment. Let them know that you enjoyed the podcast and all that. You know what to do. Hit that like, hit that bell, hit that sub. Thank you so much for those of you who chose to be here tonight. I know it's a big night for some of you, other things to watch for sure besides On the Pen. But thank you for being here. If you're watching this posthumously, drop a comment to let us know that you appreciated the live. Thank you so much for being here. Thank you for being the best part of what we do at On the Pen. Such amazing things coming down the pike on this channel, and I couldn't have done it without you. So many of you have supported the work that I've done in such meaningful ways. Michelle, it's great to have you back tonight. Jen, Creamy Jalapeno, who was here earlier this evening too. I don't know if you're still here, Creamy, but thank you for being here. Y'all are so great and great to me. I appreciate it, Rudy. Thank you for hanging out. Love y'all. Appreciate y'all. Now may the Lord bless you and keep you. Make his face shine upon you and be so, so gracious to you this week. Thank you all for being here. Love you. You're the best part of what I do. We'll check you on the next one.